That's what bro visuals. So yeah, I wanted to touch bases on my earlier video I posted talking about how I think Oshay Jackson and Anton Daniels are wrong about well, kind of both wrong about the situation with in the college down there with trying to say a kid had a screwdriver and all that and tried to attack somebody. That's what Anton was trying to address, and Oshay did a hit piece in rebuttal to it, proving that these schools were these schools have been threatened by by white people in regards to Charlie Kirk's passing. It's just funny because they ironically went straight to black people instead of seeing it as one of their own, white liberal. But hey, so my thoughts on it is the fact that both guys are kind of wrong, but both are wrong. But Anton Daniels kind of slightly has a lead, and what that lead represents is the reality of the overall situation, or overall black situation. The truth is, most black people overall this country is historically center-right, or right-leaning conservative, also liberal too, and that also historically includes black people. Majority of black people is more center-right conservative, historically so. The problem with it is the fact that we voted for Obama twice, and Anton is right about the identity politics. That is a problem, but the only thing is that's the exact same thing that the old school used to say. Not all skin folk is kinfolk. That's basically the same thing. So. And also with the conservatives, I disagree with the point they try to make, when we voted Republican. No, we voted conservative back in the 60s and so forth. We voted conservative because that's what we historically are. But the truth is, if it's 1930, right, in the Deep South, you have a Klan member Grand Wizard Fool of Regalia. He's got 4 black people, 2 males, 2 females, and got them hanging up. He's about to drop the lever to hang them. And the one male, the straight male, one black male is straight, one black female is straight, the other 2 are gay and lesbian. It doesn't matter, he's going to kill them all. But even that Klansman knows in that scenario, even he knows that the straight black man and the straight black woman does have a problem or don't agree with, same-sex relationships, same-sex couples. Even he knows that. And that's the real of society. That's the reality that we used to live in prior to Obama. And quite frankly, that's what we should get back to. Not the Jim Crow era stuff and all that, but the reality that 2 things can be right at the same time. And that's where we mess up as a society on various topics. Black people are not, but the overall country has gotten too liberal too quickly, and now black people are pushing back because we know we're not that liberal. So a few years ago, I think it was getting ready. It was election time for Obama's second time before he won. Somewhere in one of the states, they did an interview thing on TV. Person asked him about black people voting historically Democrat, the older white guy. And he said because they're stupid. One could take that racially, and I got the hint of it, but I realized, I knew then there was something different, that he was saying something deeper than that. Of course, he explained himself, but when I looked at it years later, he wasn't so much talking about so much a race thing, but it's the truth that us black people, he knows that we're more conservative on certain topics in comparison to even white people. like the same-sex marriage thing. The white people kind of historically always had the border issue was kind of one of their thing too. But now it's starting to show black people have a problem with it also. You know, then you got this whole thing with you know, children, sex gender reassignment circuits in these high schools and all that, in middle schools or whatever, you know, things like that, and that is a problem. And, you know, of course, the economy always, but the truth is, we're more alike in a lot of ways, in spite of the racial history, and this is where the pro-black Pan-African argument falls short. Me personally, I don't fully agree with everything Thomas Sowell says, especially on the reparations. I don't agree with reparations either. But as far as what Thomas Sowell was saying in regards to reparations, well, not reparations, but yeah, in regards to reparations, it's complex. It's not that simple. It is simple in the sense of, you know, the government knows who we are. Simple as that. But at the same time, oh, that's what you're saying. Forget that. The Pan-African thing, like you said, is rooted out of Pan-Germanism, Pan-Slavicism. I do agree with that. There is some, although it is its own independent thing. But the thing that those movements typically have, even Oshay pointed it out, there is no, people aren't teaching, there is no real skill set in these things when it comes to teaching people in actual skills for jobs, careers, and things like that. It's just a lot of unqualified people just doing a bunch of talking. Yeah. Disqualified people just doing a bunch of talk, and there's no substance for the race as a whole. And those movements, you know, they didn't pan out for Germans or the Slavic nations, you know, at all. But the issue with the pro-black Pan-Africanism thing, you know, I know about the Republic of Biafra, which was the Igbos that broke away in southeast Nigeria back during the Nigerian Civil War. Well, the thing is, you have a bunch of, if the whole continent of Africa go Pan-African, you end up having a bunch of Biafras all over the continent. And you can't say all those blacks in those nations are a bunch of, sellouts and coons and Uncle Toms. That's because everybody has different opinions and not everybody's black. But even on the liberal side, even agree with Pan-Africanism as a whole. You know what I'm saying? Pro-blackism, or whatever you want to call it. You know? So, you know, with that being said, it's not realistic, and it was only realistic simply because white people, they had a legitimate reason. It wasn't legitimate, but they had more of a reason because it made it more realistic, because not only they found this new land, you know, now they can exploit people, enslave people, and exploit. Now it seems realistic to come get black people from Africa and enslave them. You know what I'm saying? So these things, you know, it's unrealistic, but it becomes realistic due to certain things. And with reparations, or Pan-Africanism rather, it's not suffice because it hasn't worked like it's supposed to. Yes, we all know what happened with the African independence as far as the European powers, but at the same time, it still has its problems, and it has not really achieved anything. So for me, it's really just a waste of time. And I know, and Oshay had mentioned this, because I didn't know about it before, and he talked about one of his videos, I think a year ago or so. Yeah, a lot of black people did leave in droves the pro-black Pan-African space in the 1990s. I had to look it up and research it. Yeah, it is true. I read about it, the various reasons. But the problem, you know, with both him and Anton Daniels actually agree on is, yeah, they disagree with Clinton, with Bill Clinton. And I actually like Bill Clinton. You know, it's my guy. I know what he's done. But I had to disagree with him because that goes back to the pro-black Pan-African thing. You know, Bill Clinton produced the most jobs for black people historically. And the only one that came close since then was Obama, albeit the economy is bad. But that's in spite of the crime bill. So, but a lot of black people left the Pan-African space because it went too far left. It was just too, it was nothing, it's not concrete. That's why all those black movies you had, all the in the 70s, up to the 90s, or early 2000s, they had like a pro-black caricature making jokes about it. It's not that people don't believe in it, it's just the movement itself is not legitimate, and it makes it harder for those who really do believe in it. And that's why a lot of black people left in droves. Hey, why stick with this? We're over here getting money. This is the most jobs we ever got, ever. Of course they're going to take that. You know what I'm saying? And that pulls black people back towards, towards the right, towards the conservative side, or center conservative. But that's why Pan-Africanism doesn't hold sway, because it's not legitimate, because it hasn't been legitimate in a long time. You're just living off the heyday. Oshay talked about in the video with the Asian guy from Vietnam descent. He didn't know Ho Chi Minh learned from Marcus Garvey in the 1920s and 30s. And he didn't know that. That was awesome. But at the same time, why live off the heyday of that stuff, and you're just living off the past, and it's not working. For one, anything you do have, as far as the way you're trying to make it work, won't work. Just because it worked then don't mean it work now. And whatever way you plan to work that you've been using may not work today, because overall circumstances have changed. And this is why black people, looking at it for face value, will continue to sway more towards the center right. You know what I'm saying? Most black people, even to the exception of the turmoil of the 1960s going into the 70s, even black people were still more center right. It was conservative, it was center liberal, but it was more conservative, in spite of what was going on. So another thing he don't talk about, I think he may have mentioned it, but I don't think he's talked about it, but the Pan-African, the Nation of Islam. I forgot who the person was, but there was a person he was either a member, or he was at the least inspired / connected in some way to the Nation of Islam. But this person, he killed he killed Martin Luther King's mother in the church, and he killed a deacon, and he only killed her because she was closer, because he was trying to kill Martin Luther King's father. So this is why black people have been treading careful with things like that. A lot of black people don't know that, but that's why a lot of blacks have been treading careful with the Pan-African pro-black space. And all these black colleges and anything like that, they don't represent the majority of black people. They're the minority. And that's what the Pan-African blacks are kind of scared of, because our grandparents' generation, not them, but their parents' generation, up from them on back, were more conservative, and more like, they were liberal too, but they were more conservative. It was just our grandparents' generation brought a lot of that change, which was good, but at the same time, it was problematic, because it's more about the individual. And the Pan-African space has become all about the individual. It's really, pretty much been that way since the 70s, or since the 70s and 80s, or really the 80s. It just morphed into something it don't need to be. So, that's what that is. So that's why, Pan-African space isn't what it is. I think we do need something in the middle, like between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King's ideology. But as far as Pan-Africanism, pro-black, you need something different, because it's not working. Because if you really was pro-black, you wouldn't have voted for it. Civil rights, integration. Malcolm X didn't approve of it. And that's why I think a lot of pro-blacks, like Oshay, should be quiet. And also, Anton Daniels should be quiet too, because I did look up that black fatigue. It's not what white people are saying it is, or even black people, but we do need to address and discuss our problems that we do have, and stop looking at it from, respecting what white people just don't want to see you or whatever. These problems, we need to focus on our problems for ourselves. And that's what we got away from since we integrated into white society. We were just living off of residuals as far as accountability was concerned, and each decade it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And here we are today. And now, you can show all these black colleges and all that hoo-ha, you can show all that you want. But in the day, we know the truth that all them black people in colleges, they are the physical minority, politically wise, of the overall black race in this country. You think it's the black conservatives that are the minority, but really it's really the black liberals and the black liberals, and that's really what it is. And I think people like Oshay, I know that they know that, and I think that's why they left the country. And that's when they pushing what they pushing. But they right on some things, but at the same time, the pro-blacks and Pan-Africans, they just fight for the individual. They're not fighting for the group. They say they're fighting for the group, but they're really just fighting for the individual. And that's the biggest flaw. But as far as the black conservatives go, yeah, they are a problem, but you'd be surprised how many more black people think like that. It's not because they get a follower base. It's a lot of them. You want to say it's a white audience base, that's what O'Shea say, that's a cop-out. Yeah, sure, yes, white audience, but hey, he's got some white subscribers too. You know what I'm saying? They're not all black. But yeah, like Officer State, I don't too much care for him, but hey, I know he definitely has a lot of black base, and you just want to, and you can't assume that these people have larger black bases than what you think they are. You know what I'm saying? And it's not just because they out there. It's been that way and always been that way, and it's steering back to that, and that's in spite of Trump. Trump is the shield, and whatever his Republican side is doing to Supreme Court is doing to get things back to normalcy, pre-Obama, that's what it's doing, and then so be it. Because Trump, he ain't the best example at all when it comes to being that conservative guy or conservative example of a president. He's really not. But if he can be the shield to get things back to what it was, especially with accountability, pre-Obama, so be it. And that's why you got a lot of liberals who are out there killing, being extreme, and doing things like this. I saw the statistics with that, it's a slight uptick, it has gone down, but that, as far as on the Republican side, but that can be because, Trump is in office. But either way, there is an uptick. It ain't much, but it's an uptick either way. And Trump only been in office maybe 7 months or something like that. 7, 8 months. And, it's just, it's something to think about, And, I think that's a big problem, for this country. And definitely when it comes to that pro-black side. I'll also still play caution for the black conservatives, but for them, they just don't care. Yeah, a white racist person can say what they say, but the pro-blacks can't use that as, see, everybody racist over there. That's not true. You know what I'm saying? You may have white subscribers, you don't know it, but at the same time, his follower base for like Officer Tate don't really mean that it's just all white people. It may be somewhat closer to 50-50, a mix. Either way, he may have more of a larger black follower base than you may think. And like I said, O'Shea has a tendency, and other pro-blacks, Pan-African blacks, they try to, even like LLTV, you know what I'm saying, shout out to him, they try to make it seem like these black conservatives are the minority, when in reality, it's the other way around, and it's getting back to what it was on the black side, free civil rights, as far as getting back to that black conservative thinking, and like I said, you can't call the whole race a majority coons. You can't say that. If they're the majority, You can't say they're all coons and all that sort of stuff. That's just, that's just a weak argument. It's not true. It just shows that, hey, you're really the minority in your way of thinking, and the majority may not agree with you. And that's just how that works. So, and yeah, that's crazy. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it. I still, be cautious about Anton Daniels. I don't really know fully much about his business background. I did hear something about, reading something on his father wanted some money. He may not be successful as a businessman like he claims to be, And Oshay, he's still out. The door is still out on him as whether he's an actual doctor or not. But yeah, that's my thoughts and opinions on that. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.